Viewing public, it is now 2:09 p.m. and we rise back from recess. Before we went on recess, we excused Mr. Will Castro, who we reserved the right to call back should the members need additional questions answered by Mr. Castro. But before we move on to the next witness, I'd like to open the floor to any of the members who would like to share their thoughts on uh, how the first interview of the witness went. And so at this time, the floor is open, and I recognize Rep. Staffler.
Thank you, co-chairs and colleagues. I really appreciate being able to give my thoughts on this first interview. I have many things in my mind, but the things that stand out to me the most are just the general lack of many different things. Lack of transparency, lack of due diligence, lack of organization and SOPs, lack of planning, with so many last minute decisions being communicated last minute as well, from the SOPs being requested for by different members of the team, even late after the due dates of the Boost program began. I've seen multiple conflicts of interest. I've seen multiple miscommunications from the review of the business license or no business license, complete applications or incomplete applications. I've seen multiple people wearing multiple hats, which just communicate more multiple areas of conflicts of interest, regardless of filial and personal affiliations. For the ultimate conflict, as Will Castro being his campaign manager, being the governor's campaign manager, to ensure that the governor's reelection was successful, are the things that just pop out to me in this whole conversation that we've had for the last 2 days. Especially in particular, I see that there's a redundancy of programs being administered, with the Boost Workforce program trying to replicate that of the WIOA program, which to have tried to create in a 3-week time period and effectively roll out is really not enough time to give the people who want and need those jobs actual attention they deserve. Not to mention this Boost Small Business Development Center sounds like another replication of the SBDC. These are all things that are already existing in our government, and I feel like this was just an act of duplication again by our government, which is something that people want to see end. Um, this entire process could have been and should have been something that would have elevated many community needs in the business community. Especially, we know that the private sector is what pushes our economy, and because of the poor planning, the poor rollout, and the poor overall the poor execution of this entire thing has hurt so many existing businesses or businesses that were interested in starting something up, and just put a negative pall on all of this. And it's really just such a travesty, because our people deserve better. Thank you, Chairman and Chairwoman, for all of the work that we've done so far, and I look forward to our next steps.
Thank you, Rep. Staffler. Any other member? Recognize Rep. Vicente Camacho.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I can only say that, I was very disappointed with Will, Mr. Castro, knowing that he's a Harvard graduate, a former senator, and the current chief of staff for this administration. I can't believe that he can't recall anything within the past year. So I guess we boosted him up, and I hope it doesn't go that way anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Camacho. Any other member? Recognize co-chair.
Thank you, Chairman Donald. What we have seen and heard since last Friday and again this morning from Mr. William Castro, the Chief of Staff to Governor Torres, is merely scratching the surface. Throughout his testimony, Mr. Castro kept repeating, "The governor has the final say." And I will quote, "At the end of the day, the buck stops with him, and he is held liable in his capacity as the chief executive and the only sole authority to expend these funds on behalf of the people. I want to state for the record there is no program in our government wherein the governor is personally handing out checks, handing out fans, handing out rice, handing out butane stoves. No other program except this boost program. There was no explanation for why they kept extending the deadline when they knew that the original seed money, 11 million, and again 6 million on December 1st, was gone within the first 241 applications they approved. There was no transparency, no records of when the review panel members recused themselves due to conflict of interest, no adverse remedy to appeal denials, or why, when an applicant asked for 30,000, was only given $5,000. On at least one occasion, non-panel members who were subcontractors and boost recipients themselves were reviewing applications at the direction of Mr. William Castro. When Mr. Castro granted access to the documents he scanned, he gave access to our legal counsels. Every single member of this committee had to request permission to access those documents, delaying our review of those documents. But he certainly granted access to Ms. Selena Sapp, Mr. Shane Villanueva, and a Mr. Jason Palacios. The government is supposed to guarantee fair process. There is neither fairness or a process with the implementation of the Boost program. We all agree that the government should support people in time of need. However, that help should be provided fairly and impartially. There should be an open process that is equally applied. Unfortunately for the Boost program, there was no written process, no record of meetings, no neutral decision makers, and the only decider, according to Mr. William Castro, was Governor Torres himself, who appears to have used the program to please potential voters. But the most important takeaway from Mr. Castro's testimony is that this joint committee should direct all questions to Mr. John Arroyo, President and CEO of the Bank of Saipan. And I am glad to say that in the next few minutes, we will have Mr. John Arroyo in the chamber to answer some of our questions. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, co-chair. Any other member? I recognize Rep. Probst.
Um, Thank you, Chairman. Um, Thank you, chairs and colleagues, our legal counsel, our team for putting together a really good hearing that got to the heart of a lot of things. Um, there's so much that we'll cover, I'm sure, under recap, but just want to point out some of the most fundamental things is that I've never seen a more biased grant. I don't even know if you can call this really a grant, gifts or whatever you want to call it. Free money, cash grab, maybe would be better suited for it. You know, and some are saying, well, aren't there some legitimate business? Of course there are. I mean, you close your eyes and throw a dart at the bullseye enough times, you're eventually going to hit the bullseye. But yes, there are some, of course, deserving companies that got it, and there are some that are less deserving. But the most basic fundamental things that we're missing is just there was no accountability. There's nothing to go back on if there is somebody to file a a grievance or to question it or whatever. There's no records really on their part, supposedly to protect themselves from what? There is bound to be taxpayer lawsuits. I'd be surprised if there weren't. And I have heard people talking about that. And who's going to be liable for all of this? That's a question. But the most basic thing, and that's the thing, I look forward to listening to Mr. John Arroyo today. Thank you, sir, for being here today, by the way, the president of Bank of Saipan. But, but the chief of staff kept shifting it back to Bank of Saipan, and they're the administrator. And I just can't fathom an administrator, just from all the things we've seen, would be okay with a lot of the stuff that we've seen. And that's why it's going to be interesting to hear what we have to hear. But one of the most basic things is we had a lot of businesses on island that applied for the economic injury disaster loan. And many of them didn't even get anything from this boost grant. They were vetted properly, thoroughly, and didn't get anything. It's unbelievable that these businesses that were actually suffering during COVID, that went into deeper debt by getting this loan to try to stay afloat, should have been prioritized. Perhaps should have been really looking at, hey, these guys got the EIDL, they're legitimate business. But then when we do go through these businesses, and I look forward to opening up a few of them today. But these businesses, that some of them don't even exist, or were closed, or haven't been open for a long time, or businesses that are not really worthy, perhaps, or questionable, got huge amounts, but not just for one, like a person, not just for one grant or one boost grant, multiple 600 or $700,000 worth of boost grants. No one could pick that up. None of the panelists, not the administrator, nobody, but our staff who has so many other things to do, looking at it at 2 a.m, opening up paper. I'm not even a professional investigator. I'm not even a loan specialist. I don't have any special degree on looking into detective work. All I did was go to Commerce, look at some companies, put 2 and 2 together, and got 4. Actually, there was about 6. It's madness to see that this was able to happen, and then to find out how certain panelists were definitely conflict of interest. We mentioned conflict of interest. What? Well, hold up. Conflict of interest. Let's hold up on that, right? Of course, there's bound to be conflicts of interest. How could there not be? But what do you do? Well, we're not really sure on that, Nonetheless, what we have seen, at least what I've seen, let me speak for myself. What I have seen is straight up fraud on parts, on applications and other things, and the amounts that are given just randomly. There's no rhyme or reason why one company would get this much, and then another company that offers similar or same service, maybe even better service, or has a better plan, got far less. And nobody thought that was a problem. Nobody, not the Bank of Saipan administrators, not the panelists, not the governor. Nobody was home. What this shows is complete favoritism and failure for fairness, and that this program was rigged from the beginning. Things that changed and evolved on a whim. I'm just really sad for all the legitimate businesses out there that will probably never get 1 cent, that were lied to when they said you no one has been denied. What kind of lie is that? You look through a stack of 200 applicants, you picked out 20 to go to be given a boost grant. 180 didn't get it. They weren't denied. Then what were they? They were bypassed, but they weren't denied. Come on, really? You insult this body's intelligence. You insult our constituents' intelligence. You insult every single business that spent time and money and running around and applying for a boost grant they never had a chance of even getting because they weren't connected. Am I upset? Yes, I'm upset. I'm upset because businesses got ripped off. Some got crazy, insane money, and I cannot wait to open up those files and ledgers to look at how fantastic they are to get this kind of crazy money. When some, I did see the business plans that were fantastic. It looked like something that was written by an actual Harvard graduate, not Harvard, maybe a Yale graduate, right? That was fantastic. Just expert. This guarantee. Wait, I didn't get anything. I'm like, dude, no way. This is freaking awesome. That's the kind of stuff we have dealt with from our constituents. When we look at excellent business plans that should have gotten something and they didn't get a single penny, and especially when they turned it in early, we all should be upset because I feel that we've been spinning our wheels, not getting to the truth, just getting a lot of lip service. I hope we get more than that in this next round. Thank you.
Recognize Rep Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and co-chair. Thank you to the committee also as well for all your hard work. I just wanted to state that, and I will be making this recommendation to Mr. Arroyo, that we put a freeze or we put a hold on the release of any more boost checks moving forward. I know there's a transition of administration. The election's over, first of all, and the transition of administration will be taking place in a few weeks from now. And there are so many uncertainties with even just a simple number, clear number of how much ARPA money we have left. We cannot even get that information, that straight information. And to be issuing out, further issuing out boost checks, and I just want to also echo what the vice speaker mentioned a few sessions ago about the U.S. Inspector General coming to visit the Sinamai. Um, and then when we open our books and do a forensic audit with the next administration, that we don't know in essence if we're putting all these boost applicants in jeopardy, whether or not they would have to be liable to pay that back. And that's a risk that I'm not willing to take. And I recommend that, Mr. Chairman, also to the committee that we have Mr. Arroyo and the I forget the title of the Mr. Will Castro and the two others review panel, and they put a hold on any further releases of boost checks. I heard that they released another one last week Friday. I think we need to put a stop to that. It's not that I'm against small business, and like what Rep Pro said, there are many deserving small businesses out there, and then there are that have applied that have gotten a fraction of what they've asked for, and the amounts that they've asked for are very reasonable compared to some individuals that got hundreds of thousands or over 100,000. So yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to put that recommendation out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep Camacho, and thank you to all the members. After today's testimony with Mr. Castro, I feel that we are further away from the truth. And what we're trying to do here is better understand the Boost program, how it is administered, who is in charge of reviewing applications, who approves these applications, how our awards are determined, and basically to get answers that we as representatives, can relate to our constituents who have pled for assistance and to intervene should we need to. And so while we are still in the process of interviewing parties involved with the program, we want to assure the public that this joint committee would like to see that this program is implemented in a way that is fair and reasonable. And so as we move forward with the rest of the witnesses, the committees will determine what the next steps will be. And so we will have hearings for the rest of the week. And up next, we have Mr. John Arroyo. And so at this time, I would like to invite Mr. Arroyo to come into the chamber. And if I can get counsel to swear in Mr. Arroyo. Thank you.
Mr. Arroyo, could you stand and raise your right hand, please? Mr. Arroyo, do you solemnly swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you shall give in the matter at hand shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. Good afternoon and welcome, Mr. Arroyo. First of all, thank you for coming for the Ways and Means and JJO Committee in a joint committee meeting to get a better understanding of the Boost program. But before I open the floor to the members, I would like to ask you a few questions just to understand your role in the Boost program. And so with that, can you please state your name and current position for the record?
My name is John Arroyo. I am President and CEO of the Bank of Saipan.
Thank you, Mr. Arroyo. And how long have you been the president and CEO?
About 6 years now.
And your overall involvement with Bank of Saipan?
Well, I'm in charge of the day-to-day operations of the bank.
Can you briefly describe your duties and responsibilities as president and CEO?
Well, as I said, I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of the bank. So that's just to ensure that the bank functions as the way it should be functions, directed by my board of directors. That would include all the operational aspects of the bank: lending, paying, receiving, accounting, IT, those various departments of the bank.
And is it your role as president and CEO to go out and solicit government financial contracts?
Yes, with the authority from my board.
And what is your role in regards to the Boost program?
I represent the bank as the administrator of the program.
And who else from Bank of Saipan has anything to do with or provides any services to the Boost program in whatever capacity?
There are a few individuals in the bank that are responsible for certain aspects of the program. Karen Kalin, who is our loan manager, is responsible for the incoming and receiving logging of all the applications. Gina DeLeon Guerrero is responsible for cutting checks that were approved for distribution. And then Karen Kalin is responsible for distributing the money once those checks are cut.
Thank you for that. Mr. Arroyo, how well do you know Governor Torres?
Not very well.
Prior to Boost, have you ever worked with him in a professional capacity?
No, not at all.
Do you know him on a personal level?
No, not at all.
And what about Mr. William Castro, the governor's chief of staff? How well do you know Mr. Castro prior to Boost?
I met Will Castro on Guam when I was involved in, I can't remember what else we were working on, but I did meet him while we were on Guam. That was the first time I met him. I know him. I guess you'd call us friends, but we're not friends to the degree that we do things together. We don't go to each other's homes. We don't go to barbecues together or parties together. We don't take trips together. Really, until Boost, the only time I would see Will is whenever I ran into him somewhere.
Okay, so even in a professional capacity, aside from Boost, you've never worked with Mr.
No, I
Castro?
haven't. Yeah.
Thank you. And what about your relationship with Mr. Atalik, the Secretary of Finance?
I first met Mr. Atalik when the bank put together a financial literacy program. We create videos for young kids to educate them on proper spending and uses of money. And I was told that he at one time was a member of an organization in San Diego that promoted Chamorro culture. So I went to see him to see if he could provide me with some contacts there that maybe we could promote our videos to the Chamorro people who lived in the States. That was the first time I met him. And until Boost, I would only meet or see him when we ran into each other in public.
Okay, so no personal relationship.
No.
All right. Do you have any relationship with Mr. Edward De Leon Guerrero?
No.
Mr.
Not that
Jesus
I'm aware of.
Taisagui?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. No.
What about Mr. Taisagui?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Records reflect that Mr. Castro, at least on one occasion, asked Miss Selena Sapp, who is a business partner of Mr. Rob Trevilla, and Mr. Shane Villanueva to assist in reviewing boost applications. What is your relationship with Miss Sapp?
I've only met her through the Nonstop Corporation that has been contracted to carry out the marketing promotional aspects of Boost. I've never met her before. I don't know her very much, and I very rarely run into her.
Thank you. And what about Mr. Shane Villanueva?
I met Mr. Villanueva because of an association with the Saipan Chamber of Commerce. And we did employ him one time at the bank to produce some bank shirts for us. But aside from that, I have no other relationship with him.
And what about Mr. Perry Enos Jr.?
I met Mr. Enos Jr. Because we're members of the same Rotary Club. And we've on occasion talked about business. We do on occasion we hang out at the beach, smoke cigars, drink scotch, things like that. But we don't necessarily do much beyond that. It's just more or less business kind of discussions, sort of things. We did hire him to do some work for us. It was in regard to a debit card program that we're launching soon. So his company did some work for us. But aside from meeting at Rotary Club meetings, I don't necessarily socialize with him.
You said you hired him to do some debit card work with you guys, but nothing in relation to Boost?
No, that was not in relation to Boost.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Arroyo. Floor is open to the members, and I recognize co-chair.
Mr. Arroyo, we received word that the FBI was at the Bank of Saipan this morning. Are you able to talk to us about that?
Well, they were there. I have to get some direction from legal counsel on how much I could disclose about the reason behind their visit.
If I may, they asked us.
You may, Mr. Gregory.
They asked us not to discuss it, at least in the notice, we were not supposed to discuss it.
Fair enough. Are you able to give us a copy of the warrant?
I don't have it with me, but I can provide, it's not a warrant, it's a subpoena,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So you'll be able to provide this committee with that?
I'll look and double check whether I'm authorized to, at least I'll provide it to legal counsel.
Okay. So, Mr. Arroyo, you're not able to talk to us about why the FBI paid a visit to the Bank of Saipan this morning?
Not on the advice of legal counsel.
Thank you. Fair enough. I yield.
Thank you, co-chair. I recognize Rep. Vicente Camacho.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome again, Mr. Arroyo.
Thank you.
How was the Bank of Saipan selected to administer the Boost program?
Well, I can go into a really long description of the process if you'd like. Early in the beginning of the year, I was approached by Mr. Castro, who came to me with an idea. He mentioned that there were some ARPA money available. And if the governor wanted to find a way to make this money available to small businesses on the island who had been impacted by the COVID economy. He had asked if the bank would be willing to participate in some kind of plan to distribute this money. And I said, well, depending on how it was developed, then yeah, we would be interested in participating. Conversation went on to, well, how can we, the government, design a plan to do this? He was thinking in terms of a loan program, kind of a low interest rate, possibly a forgivable loan program. And he mentioned that, certain government agencies that would normally administer these funds had indicated to him that they could not handle, that kind of work at the moment. And I said, well, if you're looking for somebody to help you design a program for a loan, then we do that all the time, and I would be willing to assist you, to help you in doing that. At that point in time, we weren't discussing anything about administering a program. It was just the bank volunteering its time and its knowledge and expertise in creating a loan program that could possibly be beneficial to businesses on the island, in the CNMI that were hurting, as a result of the economy. Over the course of several months, that discussion, we had gone through certain iterations of how that loan program would look. We finally, I had finally put one together, submitted. Each iteration, was one that I would submit to Mr. Castro and say, well, tell me what you think about this. Do we need to make changes to it? How do you think it sounds? And also involved in the conversations were representatives from the Department of Commerce and Department of Finance. And so he said he would share that information with them and then get back to me. So as time went on, and whenever that they needed to make changes, he would send me some messages and say, well, let's do this, let's do that, let's change it to look like this. And then I would make those changes and then submit again to them for their review and consideration.
Okay.
At some point in time, and I can't remember when, it was determined that this money could not be lent, that it could only be distributed in the form of a grant. So they asked that I modify the description so that it would apply to grant funds instead. So we made changes. I sent that up the ladder. They looked at it. They said, okay, these look good. Let's go with it. It was always that, I would, and his final response would be that we would need to get this to the governor, have him sign off on it for it to be approved. And then we would wait for word to come back that it was approved. And then kind of during that conversation, we were invited to submit a contract to act as administrator of this boost program, which we did. And they held on to it for a while, but during that time, things were moving forward. With advertising, marketing, and promoting of the program, and he would ask me to work with certain marketers to start developing the items and the collateral for the promotion of the program, which I was in communication with. We subsequently hired Nonstop organization, a Nonstop corporation, to serve as the marketing, advertising, and promotional vendor for the program. They subcontracted with a company on Guam called Greenlight to assist them in doing that work. But during this time, we were asked to, get them to start working, and I would keep coming back to Mr. Castro and saying, well, I can ask them to do the work, but I can't make them to do work because I can't guarantee payment to them. I can't guarantee payment to anybody because I don't have a contract in place. And so that kind of went on for a while. And then what we eventually received from Secretary of Finance was the subaward with the condition that those funds were to be used to administer the boost program. And so that's how we came on board as the administrator.
All right, thank you for that answer. So, is Bank of Saipan qualified or authorized to handle federal monies?
I don't know what kind of qualifications, we would have to adhere
From,
to.
from what I understand, is Bank of Saipan FDIC certified?
No, we are not.
Okay, because from what I understand, if you're not FDIC certified, you are not supposed to handle federal monies. Is that correct? Is my assumption
Not
correct?
to my knowledge. I haven't heard
So
that.
nobody really knows
No,
how that works, right?
no.
So from what I understand, that's kind of what I thought, that if you're not FDIC certified, or however that term works, that you're not supposed to handle federal monies. So we'll get into
I'm
that
not
a
aware
little,
of that.
little
Yeah.
more. But thank you for that answer.
Mhm.
Next question. Would you say your personal social interactions with Mr. Castro played a role in how the Bank of Saipan was selected to administer the Boost program?
Don't really have any personal social interaction with Mr. Castro, so I would say not to my knowledge.
Okay. How about interactions with David Atalik, Jesus Taisagui, Edward De Leon Guerrero, and most especially Governor Torres?
Yeah, again, I don't have any personal social interactions with those gentlemen,
Okay.
so not to my knowledge.
So how about any of the Torres brothers?
I don't know any of the Torres brothers.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you please walk us through the whole process, starting from when an applicant submits an application online? Is the process different from a walk-in applicant?
Essentially, it's the same. We download the application that's submitted online, print it, and then we log it into our register. It's screened to make sure to see if the required documentation, is submitted at the time the application is submitted, and we notate what is submitted. Um, Applicants are allowed to submit applications that are not complete, provided that they submit the missing information prior to the expiration of the program. So we've had situations where people that submit applications but don't have their maybe a business license, don't have the tax clearance or the certification of existence. Same thing would happen if somebody came into the bank and dropped off an application. We would do the same thing, register and log what was submitted. In all cases, we would provide them with a notice of receipt of the application.
All right, thank you for that. What is your role in the Boost application process? It's almost happy hour. So.
Well, we're responsible for the overall operation of the application. It's dictated to us by the committee, and it's dictated to us, by the subaward that we had received. So primarily, what we do is we take in the applications, we safeguard the applications. When the committee convenes, I guess, to look at the applications, we provide them with the application packets so that they could review. And then when we receive a listing from the committee that the applications have been approved by the governor, and their direction to start cutting checks, we do that. And then we distribute the checks to the applicants. Other follow-up documents, that are required to be submitted prior to receiving a check, so we make sure that they get that we have those on hand before the funds are released to the customer. We also produce reports, various reports that the committee would, asks us to run for them, so they could see where along the process the applications are.
Okay, and the process works, right?
For the most part, yes.
No favoritism.
Not that I'm aware of.
I didn't think so. To your knowledge, sir, who are on the review panel?
The review panel consists of representatives from the governor's office, Department of Finance, and Department of Commerce. Representing the governor's office is Mr. Will Castro. Representing the Department of Finance is Secretary David Attelig. Representing the Department of Commerce is the Secretary Ed DeLeon Guerrero, although I believe he may have delegated sometimes that responsibility to Sus Tysican.
Okay. I'm just gonna throw names at you and see where they fit into all this. Nadine De Leon Guerrero. You familiar with her?
I'm sorry?
Nadine De Leon Guerrero?
Nadine.
Nadine.
Yes.
And she's not one of the review panels, is she?
No, she is not.
Okay. How about Governor Torres himself? It's important.
No, I've never seen him. I mean, come into the office or request any applications. I mean, he could. I mean, technically, because
He's the boss.
yeah, be one. But I've never seen him come in and ask for an applications for review.
Okay. Signature authority. Mr. Shane Villanueva.
He is responsible for some aspect of Boost. I believe it is the nonprofit Boost and the Fishers, Farmers, and Ranchers.
Miss Selena Sapp.
Yeah, she's subcontract by the bank to market and promote Boost, small business, and nonprofit, as
Mr.
well as I
Robert-
think the workforce.
Mr. Robert Travilla.
Yeah, he and Selena work at the same company.
Okay. Mr. Perry Innes Jr.
Perry was involved, and I'm not sure how he got involved in creating the website for Boost.
Okay, so are there anybody else from Bank of Saipan whose name I have not called out?
Other than the two other individuals that I
Mhm.
mentioned earlier, and you know their role of responsibility, none that I can think of.
Okay, how about from the government?
None other than I can think of.
Okay, any private citizens? Let's
No, not that
say the Torres brothers, maybe?
I've never had any interaction with the Torres brothers.
Well, supposedly they're good boys, but anyway. Okay, thank you for that. Other than marketing, to what extent are non-bank of Saipan employees involved in reviewing of boost applications?
Non-bank.
Okay.
Well, in connection to the Fishers, Farmers, and Ranchers, certain individuals were involved with receiving and logging applications for that particular program, and I believe also for the workforce development.
Can you name those individuals?
Not offhand, but I know that some of them were brought on board by Royal Soil, and some of them were brought on board by Nonstop.
Can I throw in a couple of names that I'm kind of familiar with? How about Miss Selena Sapp or Mr. Shane Villanueva?
Yeah, I've seen them in the office, you know, reviewing applications for, you know, those boost programs.
Okay. Did these folks, Commerce, Finance, or the Office of the Governor, members sit on the panel for every single application review?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it?
These individuals, let's say Commerce, Finance, Office of the Governor, these members, do they sit on the panel for every single application review?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
But I do have to just kind of qualify that. I've never actually seen them,
Mhm.
you know, convene. Applications are reviewed. Mr. Castro would come into the office and ask for a list of applications, and he would review them. I don't know what happens after that.
Okay. Okay. I'm sure that'll come back up, but thank you. Please name all the individuals on the review panel. that a repetitive question for you?
I'm
sir?
sorry, I didn't quite understand.
Can you name all the individuals in the review panel that you know specifically are?
Yes, Will Castro, representing the Office of the Governor. David Antelig, representing the Department of Finance. Ed De Leon Guerrero, and then sometime Sus Tysican, representing the Department of Commerce.
Mhm. Okay. Anybody else that might not be of a great name that might be involved?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right. Did a substitute ever step in for any of them?
Not that I'm aware of. Again, I'm not privy to the deliberations of the review panel. We're not in the room when they meet, so I don't know what goes on.
Okay, thank you. How are decisions made about which businesses or nonprofits to grant first?
To grant funds to?
Say again?
How are decisions made to grant the funds to?
Which businesses or nonprofits to grant first?
Oh, I don't know.
No. Okay. How are decisions made about amounts to award?
I don't know.
You run the bank, don't you?
Well, again, all those decisions are made by the review panel, and we're not privy to any of their meetings. So any of the discussions that they may have had with respect to who to award, or at least who to suggest to the governor, or recommend to the governor to award, and the amounts of money to the award, I don't have any information. We're not in those meetings. We don't know what goes on in those meetings. We just receive a listing of approved applicants, which stipulates that they have been reviewed and recommended by the majority of the panel and approved by the governor. So we don't take part, like I said, in any of the decision-making with respect to the approval of funds.
Okay. Who would be the person?
It would be the members of the review panel.
Okay. Maybe you can answer this one. Why were some businesses awarded more than what they applied for?
Again, I can't answer the question because that would be part of the review panel discussion,
So
and we're not present when they make those decisions.
you don't see any of these amounts
I see them after the fact.
after the fact.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Vicente asked.
What role did the governor play in reviewing boost applications?
I don't know, other than the fact that he approves the recommendations that were submitted by the review panel. I don't know what else he does.
Huh. Okay. All right. Yeah, well, this question might not apply because you may not know it, but I'm going to ask anyway. This is all money play here. You would know. Please explain the priorities as to what company deserved $5,000 or $250,000. These are big amounts coming out of a bank.
I can't
It's a
answer that
grant.
question. Again, those are all decisions made by the review panel, and we are not part of those discussions. So I can't tell you how the funds awarded or arrived at.
Okay. How much money are you holding for all this, for the boost program? Or did you hold before giving it out? Total.
So far, I believe 17 million has been transferred to the bank. There are some 300,000. Well, I believe there's almost 1.5 to 2 million, I think, available, I believe.
Because from what I would understand, what I would know is, you can't hold all that money in there and just not know how much money is given up, because you have to divide that money up into some form of numbers. But that's for another question. Who made the call to consider applications that were incomplete as of the final deadline?
Who made the call to consider applications that are incomplete as the final? You mean as far as the review panel?
Hmm.
Um, Again, Mr. Castro would come in and take a look at files. We don't know what files he's looking at because they're all available to him in one room. So whatever he decide, I guess I'm not sure if he decides them or whatever the committee decides to review, then that's a deliberation that doesn't include us.
I just want to clarify something. Are you a part of the review panel?
No, I am not.
Okay. Thank you for all the answers.
Thank you.
Are you?
Thank you, Rep. Camacho. Mr. Royal, can you just quickly run through the whole process of when you, as an administrator, when you receive these applications, what happens next up until the time maybe they are being awarded? So can you just run us through that process of your role and starting from the beginning up until when these people would get awarded?
Okay, so when applications are received either electronically or they're brought into the bank in person, they are logged into our logbook. They're screened to see which of the required attachments were submitted. We notate what it was submitted. We provide to the applicant a receipt that their application had been submitted. Those then are boxed and safe kept for the review panel to come in and request to look at those files. Once they're done with their review work, we receive a notice from Mr. Castro saying, this is the list of approved applicants. Um, uh, Go ahead and start cutting the checks to release those funds. That list goes to Gina De Leon Guerrero, who's responsible for cutting the checks, and then they're transferred over to Karen Kalin, who would do some due diligence to ensure that all the documentation is in place that we have that is supposed to be there before the checks are released.
So you don't send a list after a certain period to the review panel. You just get them ready, and then they come in and look at the list and pick and choose.
Sometimes they request a list, of the current applications. Other times they will just come in and there is a room reserved just for all the applications. And sometimes they would just come in, sit down, and look at the applications.
So you actually put them in a box in a room, and then they come in and look through the
Yes.
applications.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's no process as to which box to look at first, because these were the first group that were submitted. It was just all laying around.
I don't know what the process is that they go through to identify which applications they want to review. In the very beginning, what it would be is we would get a request to give me all of the applications from Rhoda, or give me all of the applications from Tinian, or give me all of the applications that meet a certain industry designation, and then we would do that. But I guess to make it more convenient for them, it was decided to put all of the applications in one room so that they can come in and take a look at whatever they wanted to see, whenever they wanted to see them.
So there was a box with like 50 applications in this box. You wouldn't know if they've ran through the whole list and reviewed every one of them?
No, we wouldn't know. Again, we're not privy to the work that the review panel does, so I don't know what they've reviewed, what they haven't reviewed.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Sorry, we'll go in order. We'll have Rep Probst and then Vice, and then Vice Speaker, then Vice Chair, and then back to Rep Ben. So Rep Probst, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Arroyo, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time. And I know you, being president and CEO, you have a lot of responsibilities. So your time is very important to us. And we thank you again. Um, the first thing I wanted to ask you, just that, so it would help our committee out, something that I've actually wanted from the very beginning, is that we did receive the documents that you sent to us, and it's helpful, but it doesn't go far enough. And sir, I know from you being a banker that you could probably pull this out in relatively a short amount of time. I would like to request if you could give to us the Boost Grant Awards that were given in chronological order, sir. That means with the dates that they were that they applied for the boost, and then right next to that, you could give us the dates that they were given, and then the amount. Sir, if you could get that to us by in 10 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. But that was a joke. In the time that you need for it, if you could send it to our, I'm sorry, chair, do you want it sent to the chair or to the legal counsel or?
The same way it's been given. So
Okay,
to the
sorry.
chairs.
If you could give it in that order, that would really help us because
Just as a point of clarification, if I may, Mr.
Yes.
Chair.
State
Uh,
your point.
It was stated earlier in Mr. Castro's testimony that the Bank of Saipan had already prepared and submitted on a regular basis a ledger that included the dates that applications were received, or I guess logged by the bank, the names of the applicants, the dates that they were reviewed and ultimately awarded, and then the amounts requested and the amounts awarded. So that, and then we saw in some of the documents that you submitted, that Mr. Arroyo submitted, that that ledger also included the percentage that was awarded versus what was requested. So I think that is the ledger that Representative Probst is
thank
asking
you.
for.
Yes, that is the ledger I was asking. I'd just like to request a copy of that for our committee so that it would be a lot easier. We're not so concerned about finding it in alphabetical order. We'd like to know who received it first, when did they apply, and this is something that would make our job certainly a lot easier. I don't think it's.
I mean, I guess, I can talk with the legal counsel about sort of fine tuning this. As long as we don't give any personal information out to any of
Sure.
us, I think it's
Yeah,
certainly doable to do. And so, yeah, maybe let's just, let's see if legal counsel can actually turn this into a specific request, and then we'll be able to.
Okay, and counsel, if you could, we're not asking for any material, like, we're not asking for social security numbers or anything that's, we're not privy to, but certainly the things that we are, which should be made available. Again, that was my first request. And then I wanted to ask Mr. Arroyo, when we were listening to Mr. Castro speak initially in the beginning, he mentioned, he kind of walked us through it, and I don't have the great, but let me just try to go back to what Mr. Castro was saying, and please correct me and help me out here. But essentially, it sounded like when you reviewed these packets or these applications, you'd put it together, and you had some sort of scoring system, or you'd put something on it, and then it was once everything was complete, then it was given to the panelists to look through. Is that sort of how it went through? Was there some sort of scoring system that ranked a particular business higher or one that was lower? Was there some sort of scoring system that you put together as the administrator?
Yeah, so with the program, a system was developed that the review panel could consider when they were making their deliberations. But we don't complete that form. Again, that form should be completed by the review panel because they're the ones who's going to more or less score the loans and use that total score in determining who should get funds and who wouldn't.
Okay, thank you. So again, this is just for us to get this. So like, let's say for example, I had a small little restaurant, like a tea shop or something like that, for example, and I, put together my packet and submit it to you, and I asked for $400,000 for this business. And you would review that business? Would you look through it and look at um, their business plan?
Yes, we would read through the business plan. And again, it's not for determining, whether or not they should get an award, or if they do get an award, how much they should get. We're just reviewing to make sure that the application is complete.
Okay, thank you. And that's very important that we know this from this point on. So it's just to see if it's complete,
Yes.
essentially. You're not rating it on, is this sustainable, or, and you don't do any fact finding, right? You don't go and see, you don't go and check the business.
No, we don't.
So correct me, forgive me, but that's not your responsibility. Is that correct?
No,
As
we
administrator.
rely on the submissions, the certification of existence, the tax clearance form, the business license, to that these businesses are bona fide existing businesses.
And with that said, you don't know who owns the business, or the shareholders, or the owners of the business?
No, we
You-
don't. We don't ask for any articles of incorporations, any bylaws, anything that would indicate who the owners of the businesses are.
Okay, strictly, if it were complete, and whatever they submitted was complete. Because
Yes.
again, I'm just making sure that we have this down. It'll make our job a lot easier as we move on to know what questions to ask our panelists versus asking you as an administrator.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm glad that is clarified. And with that you're the administrator, can you tell us how much is remaining of this boost grant right now there, and how many applicants are still being reviewed?
On top of my head, I can't tell you how many applications, but I can tell you that there are thousands.
Thousands. Okay.
The remaining funds, I mean, just from taking what was dispersed and what was remitted to or transmitted or wired to us, there is a difference of about 1.5 million remaining if those funds have not been earmarked to cover other expenses for the program.
Thank you. And out of this 1.5 million, does that include 1.5 million that's reserved just for these businesses that remain, or does that include the WIA program? And because wasn't
It
there
includes all boost programs.
so that includes the, do you know
The-
how much that would take away for this with putting this WIA program together? Is there an estimate as to what this will cost?
No, not that I can tell you right off. I can probably get you that information later, but I can't tell you.
I would appreciate if you give
Mhm.
us that information. It'll give us a clearer picture. And the reason why I ask you this, sir, is because there was this phenomenal push to get this out during the election, and that's why a lot of us were looking at this. The number of advertisements that were coming out nonstop on social media, not to mention the gala mixers, the fancy mixers, which still makes us wonder how federal money was used to purchase alcohol, booze, which is normally a no-no in most federal programs. It's shocking, but hey, bringing in top bands from wherever and everything, and that was just something that we were trying to understand. I'm just concerned because the push for spending this money, right? The, the I think it was what $10.6 million that was spent on, and again 241 businesses awarded, you know, and farmers and fishermen and other things. That out of that money, sir, how much? Because I did look at the exchange between you and Mr. Castro. So was there more than $2 million spent on marketing this and advertising for this program?
I can't give you that exact number right now, but I can provide it for you after the meeting if you'd like.
I thank you so much. If you could give us, sir, a breakdown of the actual cost of marketing, what marketing companies were paid, how much they were paid, and how much it cost overall to market this program. Of course, it's reasonable to have marketing or advertising expenses. We understand that, but this committee, myself, would like to see the actual figures for that so we could compare it to other grant what was that other grant grants that have been done in the past. I apologize for my long time. I yield at the time.
Thank you, Rep. Probst. I recognize Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Arroyo.
Good afternoon, sir.
Council. Karen, welcome to your chamber. Uh, you mentioned that there was a total of $17 million that was transferred to Bank of Saipan.
Yes,
And of the $17 million, there's $1.2 million left.
somewhere around that amount. Yes.
So how many total boost applicants have been awarded?
I believe
That's
200 and something. I don't have that exact number, but I can get that for you.
So about $15.8 million have been exhausted just on
Something
the boost
around
program.
that number. Yes.
Okay. It's just interesting because I guess these are more real numbers. So numbers we were getting earlier was $6 million and $11.2 million.
Mhm. But along with this report that's being requested, the exact dollar amounts will be there. What has expended and what still remains to be.
Sure,
to be
because
expended.
I think maybe a week ago or so, there's a request by the Secretary of Finance for an additional $20 million, which worries us here in the legislature because in the deliberation of the budget process, they said that there's an exact spending plan that had been approved by the U.S. Department of Treasury already for the ARPA monies. And the first initial boost with numbers was between $6 to $10 million. Now we've already expended $15.8 million just on boost, and if we're requesting an additional $20 million, we've already gone away from the spending plan that had been approved by U.S. Department of Treasury. So, but thank you for that information. It's much clearer.
If you don't mind, I'm aware of an additional $3 million, but not an additional $20 million.
Okay, so he's requesting for an additional $20 million. Now you're saying that you're aware that there's potentially another $3 million to make it $20 million.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And we will get that information or the latest information once you get the information,
Yes.
the requested documents by Rep. Probst. Earlier, you had mentioned that the review panel was Mr. Will Castro, Mr. Tysico on behalf of Mr. De Leon Guerrero of Commerce, and then the Secretary of Finance. You also had mentioned that Ms. Selena Sapp and Mr. Shane Villanueva had been reviewing applications.
Yeah. So on certain boost programs, Fisher Farmer Rancher, and I think the workforce development, they would basically take in the applications. And with respect to the, we'll call it the FFR, the application really there isn't really much to it. It is just an photograph, some kind of documentation that the individual is actually a fisherman or a farmer or a rancher. and some kind of testimony attesting to the fact that this individual is a fisherman, farmer, or rancher. Now, these are for the sustainable applications, those individuals who fish, farm, and ranch for their own personal livelihood. So those applications are fairly simple to take in. It's a picture of something, some kind of written documentation, and that's pretty much about it.
Sure. And that's the $500,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So were they being contracted by the government, or was Banco Saipan subcontracting them to review those documents?
We did not contract with them to do that work.
So they were contract directly,
I'm not sure who they're contracted with.
but they were reviewing these documents in the Banco Saipan building?
Yes, they were.
Do they have a rental space with Banco
No,
Saipan?
no. And we make the space available. I mean, it's just one of those community service things that we do.
Yeah, well, we were just talking about some of the documents that we would be receiving or requesting from Banco Saipan, and Council had mentioned that we want to make sure that there's no private information that would be shared on these documents, but yet we're allowing. I understand that it's a smaller amount, it's 500, but still, there's private information.
On
And-
the FFR, there really isn't much information other than a photograph and some testimony saying that this person does farm or fish or ranch. That's it. There's nothing more than that.
Okay. Well, I guess where I'm getting to is how do they qualify to review these documents, and it's not getting to the review panel, and who's contracting them to review the documents?
I'm not aware of a contract to do that. Again, we didn't hire them. The way that all happened, and I was off island at the time it
Mhm.
happened, was just, and maybe Karen can answer this better than I am because I wasn't here when it happened, but it was one of those situations where we were caught off guard and people were standing outside, wanting to submit applications, and we didn't really know, at least Karen didn't know what was going on, but we allowed them to come into the bank because they were outside in the elements, and we were asking for instructions on what to do with these people, and we were, according to Karen, told to just accept the applications, and that's what we did.
And that was coming from who? Who approved
I,
the?
I'd have to have Karen answer that because I wasn't directly involved in those conversations. Again, I was not on island. And then because the staff was overwhelmed by the number of people coming in just to drop off applications, it was decided that, these individuals would come on board to assist us in receiving applications. And as far as I know, that's all they do is just take the applications in. And then they are submitted to the review panel for their decision.
Okay, so those individuals, namely Miss Sapp and Mr. Villanueva, were chosen to
Or
receive.
I guess employees of them. I don't know if they're employed by these people or how they came on board.
Yeah, because it's kind of interesting that these are federal funds that goes to central government, and then you just have private individuals reviewing documents for potential grant money
Yeah.
up to $500.
Yeah,
And
and
there's
again, I
no
just
real
want to,
process to
I
it.
just want to stress that all they're looking at is a picture.
That's totally understood,
Yeah.
but still, at the end of the day, that picture is going to use federal funds.
Mhm.
That's going to pay for whatever picture and justifications to their farming, fishing,
Right.
right?
I
So
understand.
I just want to make sure that's on record, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, because it's interesting that there's just maybe a third or fourth party reviewing other documents now that we're finding out. Thank you, Mr. Roy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Arroyo, to your knowledge, we've already established that Mr. Shane Villanueva and Miss Selena Sapp, who were contractors of the Bank of Saipan, is that correct? Were reviewing the FFR, the Fisherman Farmer Ranchers application to ensure compliance with the requirements, is that correct?
Not necessarily. We only have a contract with Miss Sapp and her company Nonstop to do marketing and promotional work for the bank. We
For the
ha-
bank, not for the boost
I'm sorry,
program.
for the Boost program. And we don't have a contract with Royal Soil
at all.
at all.
Okay, so help me understand this. The FFR, you said they were merely looking at pictures and there was no private information that could possibly, be exposed. So there was no age limit. What if a 16-year-old applied for an FFR, attached a picture, that would be compliant in your opinion?
Yeah, again, there's no, le- at least as far as submitting an application, could a 16-year-old do it? I suppose they could. Could they get the money? Then that's a different story because there's a notice of grant with terms and conditions that have to be fulfilled in order for them to accept the grant. And then a signature required on that in a sense is a contract. And so a 16-year-old would not be of age to contract.
Sure. Understood. So all that was required for the FFR program is an application, a picture or a testimonial, and that is sufficient to receive $500. Is that correct?
According to what I know, yes.
So if I applied, I went and I bought fish at a fish mart and took a picture of it with myself in it, that is sufficient to qualify me as a fisherman or a fisherwoman.
I understand what you're saying, that I suppose that could happen.
If I take a picture of me at somebody else's farm with a shovel, that would be sufficient to qualify for the fisherman, farmer, rancher boost program. Is that correct?
Yes, along with the testimony from, I guess, some other
Why
individual.
and when we have Miss Karen Callan come up here at a later date, I presented myself and I got an application for the FFR program. And all it said, it didn't require all of them. It said one or the other. So a picture would suffice according to the application, physical application that I picked up. A picture would suffice and or testimonial.
Okay.
Um, so, and you were the administrator, the Bank of Saipan, I'm sorry, not yourself personally, but the Bank of Saipan was also the administrator for the FFR boost. Is that correct?
Yes, we were.
Did you ever share any concerns, or are you comfortable with the fact that work may have been performed prior to Bank of Saipan performing any work for the boost program?
I'm sorry.
Did the Bank of Saipan engage in any work prior to the signing of a contract to be the administrator for the boost program?
There was a point in time, I think, where we were talking to the marketing companies to start putting together marketing pieces. But that was pretty much about it. Once, we started receiving invoices, then we would pay those invoices. And this would be money advanced by the bank. And then once
And that was all prior to a contract with the CNMI government.
Right. So this is bank money being used for that. But then once the subaward came in, then we were reimbursed by those funds.
Well, that's interesting. Did anyone other than Mr. Castro come to review files?
On occasions, yeah, I would see the rest of the panel, the rest
So
of
it's
the panel.
primarily Mr. Castro by himself. Is that correct?
Reviewing panels, yes. I mean, reviewing applications, yes. For the most part, it was him.
Interesting. Could the review panel or Mr. Castro review any files he wanted in whatever order he wanted?
Yes, they could.
And you already mentioned that there's a room reserved at the Bank of Saipan building
Yes.
for the review panel. Okay. So if I heard you correctly, you testified that Mr. Castro referred nonstop to the Bank of Saipan to contract for the marketing, promoting, and
Well, he
For-
said they were, they were highly recommended, yes. And so not knowing any other marketing firms on island, we decided to contract with them.
so as a referral specifically from Mr. Castro.
He was the one who suggested them.
Thank you. And if I heard you correctly again earlier, is it your testimony today that Mr. Perry Enos Jr. was contracted to maintain the Boost website?
I don't know if he was contracted, but I do know that we were told that he was the one who was creating the website. So I don't know how he was. I don't know
Selected?
how. Yeah, I don't know how he was selected. We were just told that this is the website that was being created. It was being done by Mr. Enos Jr.'s company.
AP Solutions, is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah, and that.
Do you know
it
how
was-
much his
No,
contract
I don't.
is?
I have no idea.
That's all I have for now.
Thank
I
you.
yield, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you. I recognize Vice Chair McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome again, Mr.
Thank you.
Arroyo. So, geez, I don't know where to begin. There's so many. I guess we could start with the committee that you were referring to earlier in your statement. You were referring to a committee.
You mean the review panel?
Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Okay. So let's start with the application process. How are applications to be submitted online, in person at the bank? Great.
Yes.
Is what I saw on the website.
Yes.
Have there been any instances where applications were submitted via email directly to yourself or any other individuals involved in the Boost program?
Yeah, sometimes and from time to time, I would receive applications sent to me directly, but I would respond to these individuals to please submit the application through the online email address. But at any rate, even if they were submitted me in person, I would generate them in hard copy and then send them down to the staff to record them. What we've tried to do as much as possible is get people to go to the website for all the information that they need and to submit applications there. That way we have one focal point for electronically submitted applications. They're not coming from all different directions from the bank. Other times I would receive applications that were sent to offhand, I can remember applications that were sent to secretary at the league, who then would forward them to me and ask me to log them in, and we would do that.
So for the ones that were forwarded to you or you received directly, you wouldn't reply back and say, please follow the procedure?
Well, I would only do that if the applicant submitted the application to me, because then I would have an email address to do that. But
Got
for
it.
the application submitted by somebody else, I would not have the applicant's email address. I couldn't reply back that way.
Okay, so there were some exceptions made okay. What is the process for, well, hang on. Actually, let me just clarify. So for clarification, the Boost program is a grant and not a loan.
Yes, it is a
Okay,
grant.
I just want to clarify that because you mentioned earlier, you referenced a loan. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that it's a grant. Okay. Now, you've also mentioned that so far to date, there's been a transfer of a total of 17 million, correct?
Yes.
And out of that, there's approximately 1.5 remaining, unless you're not aware of any other, or if it's already been obligated. So far, we have 1.5 million left.
Yes.
Out of the 17 million, is part of the 17 million just for, is the 17 million just for Boost recipients, or does that also include other Boost expenses?
Yes, it includes expenses.
So out of that 17 million, do you know at the top of your head how much was actually spent on just the awards?
Not off the top of my head, but that is a report that was requested that we will submit.
Okay, got it. So can you just walk us through, like, if we were to look at a flow chart of the process, right? So Bank of Saipan is the administrator for the Boots program. Now, is Bank of Saipan the administrator for the entire program or just certain programs of the Boost? Because I understand that there's the small businesses, and then you mentioned the FFR, and then also the workforce development, right?
Yeah,
Like,
by extension of the small business and nonprofit, because I guess these are the same boost funds, then we, by extension, are the administrator of these other programs.
and then you also oversee the administration of the FFR, if I'm.
Yes, by extension, yes.
So I know that earlier we were asking whether or not Shane or what's her name?
Selena Stapp.
Yes, Selena Sapp was part of the reviewing. We're reviewing applications, and you said yes, but you weren't sure how they came about to partaking in the review process. So, as the administrator of the entire program, I find it very concerning that you are not aware of who these people are and how they even got to get themselves involved in the process.
Yeah, again, they were more or less brought on board to assist the staff in looking at these applications. Now, how and where they get paid, I don't know. They were, we just received notification from Mr. Castro that he's bringing on board these individuals to help us with the process.
So, when you say they, who are you referring to?
The individuals who from Selena Sapp's company and Shane Villanueva's company, those individuals were brought on board to assist us and
Who brought them on board? So you're saying they were brought on board, but who's they?
we received a notice of notification from Mr. Castro that he has asked these individuals to come on board to assist us with this process.
Okay, that's weird because we asked Will and he said he didn't know how they got on board.
Hmm.
So just trying to clarify and verify the
Yeah,
information.
well, I know for sure we did not bring them on
Okay.
board.
But as the administrator though, shouldn't you have a say on who gets to be involved in the process?
Yeah, but all along in this process, it was more of a not necessarily us as driving it, as opposed to us kind of in kind of a committee deciding how it works. We really weren't involved in, or as far as I, we didn't really have that kind of authority to dictate how it was going to be run. We recommended and we put together some suggestions on how it would run, and then it would be run up the ladder to Mr. Castro, Department of Finance, and eventually to the governor. But key to us is because we were a subrecipient, our award was given to us from the Department of Finance. Key to us was their blessing of everything that went done because we are ultimately responsible to them.
Were you a part of the team who developed the program initially?
Yeah, it was kind of a group thing where we got together. And again, this was when it was a loan program. And the reason why they asked us to come on board is because we were,
Mhm.
our knowledge and expertise in putting together loan programs. But so we assisted them in doing that. And again, it wasn't our call whether or not to say this is the way it's going to go and this is the way it was going to be, because we were always told that it needed the governor's blessing. And then once we became a subrecipient, then we were beholden to the Department of Finance. So every decision that we needed to make, we wanted to make sure that we got the blessing of the Department of Finance.
Sure. But as being part of that team, did Bank of Saipan have any input as to how the process would flow
In
in administering the program? So did Bank of Saipan have any say in how the process should be from the time you guys receive it to the time it went to the review panel to the time it went to the governor?
Yeah, those were all detailed in the program description,
Okay.
how that would work.
So run us through the process again. So in your respective area as the administrator, right? The bank receives the application. Apparently, there was a checklist, according to Will, that the bank would check for all the required documentations that needed to be attached to the application. And then from there, once all that required documents are attached, then it goes to the review panel, or does it go into the box in the room, or like what is the process? How?
Yeah, so once the applications are received, we record them in a logbook that shows the app, and the name of the applicant um, that had submitted the application. And then we screen the application just to see if the required submissions have been submitted. We note what was, and we know, and we indicate which was not submitted.
Okay.
Then those applications are stored and kept in
So
a,
you
in a
don't the bank, not you, the bank doesn't automatically uh, prepare all these applications that are already, that have all the requirements and forward them to the review panel.
when you mean prepare the applications.
So when you guys receive the application and everything is complete, the bank doesn't automatically just put all these applications together and forward it to the reviewer. You
No,
guys
they get stored in boxes
okay.
because the review panel doesn't meet every day, and I don't, I mean, and there really isn't any schedule of when they're going to meet.
Okay.
I get a notice that, we're going to look at, at some files. Can you send us an updated listing of the application log?
So in the developing stages of this program, did the team discuss how they were to review the applications, whether in chronological order or based on the amount that was being requested, or what was the rationale, or what's the logic behind how the review panel reviews each application?
The only thing that I know is that the applications weren't being reviewed on a first come, first served basis. That's the only thing I know.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Um, so going back to the FFR application, I've never seen the application myself, so I'm just gonna ask for the purpose of others knowing. But what type of information would you request on that application, aside from the testimony or a testimonial or a photo? Like what other information are you requesting on the application itself?
That's all they're required to submit.
Okay, so it goes back to Rep. Selena Babauta, right, stating that if a 15-year-old or 16-year-old was to fill out the application and submit a picture of himself or herself with some vegetables, then the bank wouldn't even ask for an ID to ensure that the applicant is of legal age.
Yeah. So when they do come in to sign the award notice, they have to present a copy of. They have to present their identification.
And the presentation of the ID is to validate that the person is the one that's picking up the check, or to validate that they're of legal age.
I guess for both. For
You
both.
guess, or
Well, again, I would assume that nobody would contract with a minor. So when you're looking at an application, you're identifying the individual and making sure
But
that
that's
they're
a
of
huge
age.
assumption to take. I mean, you're going to go through the whole process and review the application, only to find out later that when you award the notice or you issue the notice, that you're just now finding out that the applicant is a minor. I mean, I think that's kind of irresponsible.
Well, I think the irresponsible part of it is if we release the funds and we didn't do that. I mean, getting to the point where we cut a check is to the point we cut a check. Beyond that is then when we start.
I understand that, but with hundreds and hundreds or thousands of applications
Mhm.
coming in, that's very time consuming. And to to overlook that aspect of just even first verifying whether or not the applicant is of legal age to do a contract. I would think that that's one of the priorities that as an administrator you would consider, right?
I understand, yes.
Okay. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I recognize Rep. Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Arroyo, I just wanted to ask this question again, more or less, re-ask, change the question format. Is Bank of Saipan FDIC insured? Is what I meant to ask earlier.
No, we are not.
Okay. What WIA program passed through Bank of Saipan? Do you know?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
What WIA program passed through Bank of Saipan?
WIA,
IA.
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, then you wouldn't know.
Just a
Also,
point of clarification.
State your point.
I believe Representative Camacho may be referring to the Workforce Development Program. Is that WIA stands for Workforce Investment Agency, but I think in this case for Boost, it's Workforce Development Program. Thank you.
Mr. Arroyo, is that something that you can still answer?
So yeah. So how much? What program has passed through Bank of Saipan?
Well, if it's a workforce development, only, as far as I know, only applications have been submitted, but no awards have been made.
Okay. Can you do you recall how much money were awarded to nonprofits?
Not off the top of my head, but I can certainly sort the report that was requested, not only chronologically, but we could also indicate if the awardee was a nonprofit or for-profit business.
Okay. So how much money did Bank of Saipan receive or is awarded to administer the Boost program?
$17 million.
17. It's a lot of money. I take it and run. Yeah, I'm just kind of perplexed with everything that we have discussed since yesterday. It seems like Bank of Saipan is really loose in administering the program. There's a lot of answers that just didn't make sense, but that's why we're doing what we're doing. Don't you think so? A little loose in the process in handling federal monies.
Again, the program was developed in conjunction with the members of the committee, the review panel, and one of the members of the review panel is the Secretary of Finance. And they're who we're ultimately responsible to. So when he signs off on these things, I mean, it's more or less our indication that this is what they want to see this program look like.
That you are handling $17 million. Ayo, thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Ben. I recognize Rep. Staffler.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for coming to the legislature today to help us understand this Boost program. I have some follow-up questions. But to start, before the follow-up comes, I just wanted to clarify some things. From your understanding, I've heard you say it a couple times, but I want to make it really clear. The Bank of Saipan was the administrator. So does that make a Bank of Saipan a recipient, subrecipient, or beneficiary of Boost?
According to the grant award that we received, we are a sub-recipient and a sub-awardee.
Thank you. As a subrecipient and as the administrator, I wondered if you or your legal counsel ever reviewed the final rules of the federal programs for the ARPA money.
Those rules were reviewed in general, and our legal counsel, what I understand, is taking a deep dive into them now.
Okay. I wondered also if your legal counsel was ever a part of any of the Boost application review or just communicating with the process of Boost at all?
He wasn't part of the Boost application review.
I ask only because in the testimony given by Will Castro, he mentioned that he would have hoped that the administrator's legal counsel would have mentioned if there were any issues. And so I just wanted to clarify if your legal counsel was ever referred to or requested information regarding any of this stuff prior to these hearings today.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So from your understanding, as the administrator, were you worried about the bank liability for any parts of the Boost process since you were not involved in every part, although you were the administrator?
Yes, of course, I was always worried about the liability. I mean, and there were certain things that we did to protect that liability with respect to making sure that when we distributed funds, we were doing that to the authorized individual. Yes.
Noted. So I remember hearing in the beginning of your testimony that the guidelines of this program were a collaborative effort.
Yes, more or less, but with the approval from the Department of Finance and the final approval from what I've been told from the governor.
Were these guidelines published on the website or made public available?
With respect to what was needed to be submitted to, for an application, those were published. I don't believe anything more than that was published.
Thank you. Did the protocol for reviewing applicants or applications ensure that members of the review panel would not participate if there was a conflict of interest due to family or work connections?
The review panel portion of the program description was not worked on by us. That was left to the review panel.
It sounds like there were different like it was two different Boost panels or two different Boost programs. You guys were administering one and they were administering another, or is it supposed to be administered all as one?
For the most part, the way it worked is we were more or less responsible for taking in applications, screening them, logging them, safeguarding the applications, distributing the funds. Everything beside that, we received instructions from the review panel to do.
Okay. I know that your legal counsel will find that in the final rules, it states that recipients and subrecipients must disclose in writing to Treasury or the pass-through entity, which would be you, of any potential conflicts of interest, both personal and organizational of interest, both in fact and appearance. Is that something you were aware of?
Not really.
You mentioned that you didn't know that Enos was, or how Enos was involved, and that you think he was subcontracted to do the website. But since you're the administrator of the program, shouldn't you be the primary decision maker for all those different decisions of the program?
From the marketing and promotional aspect, yes. From creating the website, that wasn't part of our scope of work. So, and the fact that a website was created, was something that was news to us.
I guess, when did you finally get your scope of work for the Boost program?
Well, the scope of work was contained in the contract that we had submitted to the Department of Finance, and the award basically, stated that it would be more or less similar to the scope of work that we had indicated there. So that's where we were governing ourselves.
So around when did you receive that?
I believe the first one came in September. The first one came in September 23rd.
In the text messages I was reading through, I found on September 15th that there was the agreement was not yet signed. So you did not receive the scope of work or agreement until after the 15th of September?
Yes, what we received was the Was it the notice of award that we were, the subaward, subrecipient,
When was the notice of award again?
September 23rd?
Oh, that, okay. But you guys had begun incurring invoices prior to that, correct?
Yeah, work had been started prior to that.
Okay. I noticed later on in text messages between yourself and Secretary Atalig that when payment wasn't received, like in November, the practice became to pull amounts from the boost award. Is that correct?
Right. So we would submit invoices to the Secretary of Finance, ask for his authorization to pay, and his authorization to pull the money from the boost funds.
So in essence, the boost awards, which are supposed to go to the grantees who are requesting, were also being used to pay for the invoices of marketing and other things that came up, expenses that came up
Yes.
for the boost program.
Yes.
Technically, that doesn't really follow procurement procedures, correct?
I'm not an expert in procurement procedures, so I couldn't tell you.
Thank you. In many of your communications, there was a mention of a Therese. Who is Therese? And what is her role in the Boost program? Was she part of the review panel or marketing?
Therese. The only Therese that I know is one of the owners of Greenlight. And no, she's not a member Greenlight was a subcontracted through Nonstop Corporation.
Subcontract. Okay, thank you. In many of your conversations, Mr. Ned Pablo is mentioned throughout, including the word creatures in parentheses by his name. What role did Mr. Ned Pablo play in the Boost program?
I can't recall a Ned Pablo. Can you give me a contact? And who was bringing up the name? Because I don't know him.
I believe this was in communications with Will Castro. There was a parentheses of creatures beside his name. And he was also provided one of the leadership T-shirts in one of the text messages.
I'm not familiar with him. I'm not familiar with those. I mean, it may have been just comments that he had made to send to me, but that didn't mean anything to me.
Noted. In the Boost marketing of September 30th, 2022 at the Bank of Saipan, he was also listed as an attendee. But it sounds like you don't have a recollection, so I will move on. Another name.
Sorry, Rep. Staffler. Can you hold that question and we'll take a
Recess?
10-minute break? Yeah,
Sure, thank
to
you.
allow the witness as well as members to stretch and then we'll come back at 4:10.
Okay,
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Arroyo, thank you. We'll come back at 4:10. Short recess.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, members. We now rise back from recess. Prior to going on recess, Rep. Staffler had the floor, and so we'll continue with Rep. Staffler's line of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you. I think we all needed a little bit of a break. Um, Moving on, I just have some questions about if, should I go back to that question, Chairman? Yes? Okay. Another name appeared in your text message exchanges with Mr. Will Castro, a person named Donata. We wondered who that person was. We couldn't tell their gender. Did that person play a role in the Boost program? They were also with the parentheses creatures beside their name.
Again, similar to the first name that you brought up, not familiar to me. And aside from what I know of, they hadn't played a role in anything that we had done.
Thank you for that clarification. Another name appears in text messages with Mr. William Castro. Who is Joe Mesa, and what role did he play in the Boost program?
I believe Joe Mesa was somebody hired to do some either photography work or take videos at some of the outreach programs that were done.
So subcontracted.
I believe so, but not through the bank.
Noted. Thank you. I have exhibit with a text message on 9/13 at 7:33 a.m. Cam, you got that?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I now that I saw those text messages, I think I know who those individuals are. I think they're part of a camera crew that takes videos and takes uh, um, pictures. I believe Creatures may be the name of the company that they're affiliated with or they work with, and so these guys would accompany um, the team as they went out to do the outreach programs on Rhoda and Tinian and just take pictures and things like that.
So creatures might be their business
I
name,
think they might be the name of the business. Yeah.
but you did not do any the Bank of Saipan did not subcontract them directly.
No. No.
So there were some other contracts that you guys had no participation in approving or being a part of at all.
That's correct.
Okay. Was that mostly related to the marketing aspect of the Boost program?
Mostly related to that.
Thank you. It appears in that text message, thank you. Is this the one? Yes, all right. It appears that Mr. Rob Travilla of One Stop Corporation had a $50,000 subcontract for marketing, but in text exchanges between yourself and Mr. Will Castro, that he was submitting invoices for payment prior to the execution of a contract. Is this true?
The execution of the contract with the bank.
I guess it would be true when we talked earlier. Sorry, you did say that there was no scope of work until after September 23rd, and this was on September 13th.
Yeah.
There's also an insistence of Mr. Castro to submit separate invoices for Rob as a standalone invoice for the same things covered under this contract. Aside from submitting invoices within the scope of this contract, Mr. Castro also insisted that the same should be done for the marketing piece. Rob's team and all costs for Rhoda should be invoiced separately in quotations. Can you explain that why that could possibly be?
Well, in the contract that we have with Nonstop Corporation, it covers their design and development of the marketing campaign and the program. Outside of that is the cost to place the ads in the news media, print media, or on the air. Other things that they also did, was coordinate events and things like that. So those were all billed outside of our contract with the company. The way those invoices were paid was we received the invoices, we submitted the invoices to the Department of Finance and got their authorization to pay.
And sometimes it would be through what I mentioned earlier before the break, that the payment would come out of the boost funding that was submitted.
Yes.
Was that for every contract, or did they sometimes pay from a different funding source?
It was pretty much from the boost funds.
Noted. Did you share any concerns to the review? Did you share any of these concerns with the review panel?
Of
Or-
the expenditures?
I'm sorry. Did you share any of these concerns with Will Castro, not with the review panel? Yeah, these expenditures.
To begin with, I would ask Will if he could facilitate payment, and then the payment would, I was informed payment would come directly from Department of Finance, so I started communicating directly with the Secretary of Finance.
Were there any written records of how applicants were prioritized?
Not that if for review by the review panel, not that I'm aware of.
Did this cause you any concern?
Well, because it was always mentioned that they weren't going to be reviewed on a first come, first served basis. Again, the working of the review panel was their own thing, and we didn't want to be involved in that because we didn't want to be in any way connected with a decision on how a decision was arrived at, whether it was prioritizing, what applications would be reviewed, determining how much money to award, anything like that. Those were all responsibilities of the review panel.
Did Bank of Saipan reconcile financial records with the Secretary of Finance, Mr. David Atalik?
Financial records with respect to?
The boost program numbers?
Yes, we're required to submit quarterly reports to them, and so those first reports should be going out by the end of this month.
Did you reconcile financial records with Mr. Castro or any of the review panel?
No, we did not.
Did it create any concern for you as the administrator that the deadline for the program kept getting extended, knowing that the majority was spent on the 241 people already?
Yes, it did.
Did you share those concerns with the review panel?
With Mr. Castro, I would, and I said, well, there's a smaller, the pie gets smaller and smaller as the number of applications grow. Is there any consideration of adding more money to the program? And those would be the conversations that I would have.
On September 23rd, Bank of Saipan received a notice of award by the Secretary of Finance. I guess we discussed that date. For the amount of $11 million for the seed funds of Boost. Subsequently, Bank of Saipan was further given an additional $6 million for a total of $17 million. Yet many of the publications advertised that there was $12 million for the application. That's a significant difference of about $5 million. So how did it come that the Bank of Saipan, a non-FDIC insured bank, was awarded the contract to administer these program funds?
How did it come about that we were awarded to administer these programs? The only thing I could say is that the Secretary of Finance took a look at our qualifications, our experience, our expertise in handling funds, the resources that we had available, and made the determination that we were best fit for the project.
Final question is, when it came to reviewing the applications, who would initiate the meetings to review applications?
The only thing that I can say is that we would receive a message from Mr. Castro saying that some applications are going to be reviewed. Can you provide him with? Could we provide him with the updated application listing?
Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Staffler. Any other member?
I have clarifying questions.
Okay, nice.
Mr. Arroyo, you just mentioned that you raised concerns to Mr. William Castro that the pot of money kept getting decreasing while the number of applicants kept increasing. But we didn't hear from you. What did Mr. Castro reply to those concerns?
He wouldn't commit to anything, but he would say more is coming.
Did he say how much more?
No.
Okay, and then we've asked Mr. Castro questions.
Well, can I just qualify that one response? Not necessarily that more is money, but I guess he mentioned that he would make a recommendation to the governor to add more money.
So basically, they said keep accepting these applications, and without any definite or confirmation from the Secretary of Finance that more money would be deposited to the Bank of Saipan. He just said keep accepting applications.
Yes.
So basically, this is a program of when supplies last.
Yes.
Okay. We have asked Mr. Castro questions like, hold on. Oh. We've asked questions of Mr. Castro. How was the award prioritized? Who came first to be awarded? And he specifically said that the Bank of Saipan is the administrator, and to ask you, how do these applicants get prioritized? And you've just told us today that it was up to the review panel, basically, pretty much. That's what you said. Is that correct? Is that
Yes.
correct?
We don't submit to them a list of names that they should look at. They request a copy of the updated application log, and from there, my understanding is they select the applications to review.
But Mr. Castro testified under oath that it was the Bank of Saipan that we should ask how these applications were prioritized. What do you have to say to that?
We've never prioritized applications and submitted that that list to the review panel.
We've also asked Mr. Castro who determines whether an applicant gets 5,000 or 250,000, and he repeatedly said and referred to this committee to ask the Bank of Saipan. What do you have to say to that?
We're not involved in the deliberations of the review panel. We're not even in the room when they review or discuss applications. And we don't make any recommendations to them as to how much money should be awarded. We've never done that.
So it is your testimony today that the Bank of Saipan never prioritized any applications, as Mr. Castro has told this committee. It is your testimony today also that you have never, the Bank of Saipan at least, has never determined what amount to give an applicant. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Arroyo. I yield for now.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I recognize Rep. Vicente Camacho.
Thank you again, Chair. Mr. Arroyo, I asked you earlier how much money did you receive for the boost program, and you said 17 million, correct? Was
Yes.
awarded to Bank of Saipan. Now, of that 17 million, how much is Bank of Saipan getting awarded for its banking services or getting paid?
Oh, about 2%.
2%. Okay, that was easy. One more. Did Bank of Saipan or the governor or Will Castro require the review panel or all involved to sign a non-disclosure declaration of confidentiality agreement?
I'm not aware of any non-disclosure agreement being signed by anybody.
Thank you for that. I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Camacho. I recognize Vice Chair Magosnia.
Thank you, Chair. So in line with Rep. Selena Babata's inquiry regarding the role that Will plays, you had mentioned earlier that Bank of Saipan receives instruction from the review panel. Can you be a little bit more specific as to who from the review panel gives instructions?
Mr. Castro would send us a message, usually would be a WhatsApp chat or sometimes an email with a list of approved applicants and the amounts to be awarded, along with the with his instructions that these have been reviewed and recommended by the majority of the review panel and approved by the board. And now we're able to start distributing the money.
Okay, so that's pretty interesting because in Will's testimony this morning, he characterized or painted the picture as if his only role in the Boost program is to review the application that Bank of Saipan forwards to him or the review panel and then makes the recommendation to the governor for approval, and that's basically it. He has no other role or capacity in this Boost program. But from what I'm hearing and from the messages that we actually saw that you have submitted, it appears that he has a little bit more than just reviewing the application and making recommendations. So would you agree with his portrayal of his role as just a panel reviewer?
I know he was more involved than just a panel reviewer. Uh, a lot of the discussions that we have, and I would go through him more or less in my mind as the point of contact for a lot of this stuff. So mostly if you could see my communications either through our chats or emails, were all kind of to him and from him to me.
Which is what most of us perceive to be right as we're reading the back and forth correspondences between you and Mr. Castro. And when I asked him whether or not there were some messages that I asked if he was what was his role in and why was he instructing certain people or even suggesting to have Selena or Shane be one of the to review the applications. His response was he was simply recommending. It was never an instruction. He was everything that he was messaging or emailing to you was never an instruction, that they were simply just recommendations. Would you agree with Mr. Castro's testimony?
Don't know if I would actually characterize it that way, because sometimes people would just show up and say, we're here to do this.
Right. So in one of the emails that he wrote to you, can you pull that up? The same exhibit that I asked Will. I believe it was an October 3rd email, I think. Right. It's an email, actually. Yeah, there. So if I may direct your attention to the screen, there was an email from Will to you on October 3rd, 2022 at approximately 2:36 p.m. And basically in this email, he is asking you to prepare the letter, right? The notice, and that he would affix the governor's signature on those notices, and his response to that was that he was simply just recommending them to you, but it wasn't an instruction. And I tried to point it out to him, right, that it was pretty clear when he says, please prepare the letter. He wasn't asking you to, you know, he wasn't recommending, he wasn't requesting, he was clearly instructing you to prepare it. So, how do you respond to his response?
Well, this is how we would normally receive the list of approved applicants, that were approved by the governor, and the uh, the the content of the letter is pretty much the same. Prepare the checks, the letters to the applicants, make the distributions.
Right. So, but do you agree with him that he was simply recommending them, making a recommendation, or was he really instructing you to prepare those notices?
To me, to me, it was an instruction to do, not a recommendation, because then that would say that I could either cut these checks to these individuals or not.
Absolutely.
And if he says that they were approved by the governor, then that's my indication that these checks should be cut. They had gone through the process as was described in the program. The final authority was the governor to approve, and then when he indicated that they were approved, then that was my indication that they're good to go.
So let me ask you this. In this particular email, did you proceed to prepare those notices?
We always did.
We always did. And can you confirm whether or not Will actually did affix the governor's signature on those notices?
We were given an electronic copy of his signature, which we placed on the letters.
So it was the bank that affixed the signature and not
Right.
Will.
Yes.
Okay. But in your professional opinion, this is pretty clear that it's an instruction to the bank and not a recommendation.
I didn't perceive it any other way.
Great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I recognize Rep. Sablon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Mr. Royal. Welcome. So on the same email, and we asked about this earlier as well. So could you help us understand, after this message went out and you cut the checks, these amounts were approved for these nonprofit entities for this first test run, right?
Mhm.
20,000 to the Chamber of Commerce and the Cave Museum on Rhoda, 100,000 to One Mariana's Initiative, Second Wind got 100,000, COVID Care Force Micronesia got 150,000. You cut those checks in those amounts, right?
Yes.
Could you help us understand then how those amounts increased, like in almost all of those cases, actually, at least doubled from based on the records that you submitted. The amounts awarded, for example, for COVID Care Force Micronesia was 250,000. Second Wind got 200,000. One Mariana's Initiative, same, and 65,000 for the others from Rhoda. How did, after this step, when the checks were cut, how did they get awarded even more money?
It could have been from another round from the review panel making recommendations and to the governor to increase the, well, to provide additional funds to their request. So the first check could have been for this amount. The next checks could have been for a second review by the panel of these same applicants.
So this would have been just an initial check, but the total amount awarded was what was indicated in the spreadsheet that you provided.
Right, based on these communications.
Okay. And if I may continue, Mr. Chairman, you stated that Mr. Castro asked you to submit a contract to administer the Boost program. Is that correct?
Well, we were invited to submit a contract, yes.
So it wasn't a bid that you submitted?
It was a contract that, we were always under the impression that, we were submitting a contract to a competitive bid. And that was a way, it would go through the normal procurement process.
But there
Um,
was no request for proposals that you saw?
We never received one. We never saw one.
Okay, and you said that your fee was 2%. So 2% of 17 million, your total fee for administering this program was 340,000?
hmm
Okay. And you earlier said that Mr. Castro asked you to work with certain marketing firms. And just to refresh our memory, one of those marketing firms was Nonstop, right?
Well, yeah, when we came to the point where we were looking at recruiting marketing companies to come on board as a contractor,
Mhm.
um, um, Nonstop was recommended,
By Mr. Castro?
by Mr. Castro. Yes,
Mhm. Okay. So Nonstop, and then Royal Soil was also recommended by Mr. Castro?
we don't have a contract with Royal Soil.
Nonstop has a contract
Yes.
with Royal Soil. Okay.
No. We have a contract with Nonstop. We
Right.
do not. Bank of Saipan does not have a contract with Royal Soil.
Who has a contract with Royal Soil?
I don't know.
Okay. And what about Friends First? Because I mean, those companies, these companies are listed in
Yes,
some
Friends
MOU that you
First.
provided.
Friends First. We have a memorandum of understanding with
Right.
that company to do certain work for the bank.
Okay.
And it not always related to Boost. So they were doing building a database for us. Is all they were doing.
Okay. And do you have a subcontract, or is there a subcontract with Greenlight as well?
That would be under Nonstop Corporation. Nonstop Corporation subcontracted with Greenlight.
Okay. And you do have a relationship, right, with Greenlight,
Yes, Greenlight. One of the owners is my sister.
Miss Therese,
Right.
right? And did you disclose that?
I did.
Okay. And to whom?
To Mr. Castro. I mentioned, and he knows
Mhm.
that I'm related to her. I mean, he's done work with her. He indicated to me that he had done work with her before in a different capacity. And that she had the work that she did for him. He appreciated and he liked, and so.
Mhm.
But yes, he knows that she is my sister.
Okay. Now, the communications that you provided indicate that Bank of Saipan had an unwritten understanding that you would advance payments for invoices for Nonstop and other contractors, and then submit to the Department of Finance for reimbursement. Why was that unwritten understanding made?
Was a phone call with Director of Finance, Secretary Atalik. When we received the grant award and we were awarded only 2%, I called him up and I said, "Well, look, a lot of this money is going to be going towards these events that are going to be held that were planned through the marketing company, and that we basically wouldn't be making any money if we were ending up paying for these events." And so he said, "Well, why don't we'll just go ahead and submit those to me outside of your agreement. Send me the invoices." And then he would sign off on, or at least let me know if they were approved for payment.
Right. And then there are emails where he says he approves
Yes.
or not, right? But
Mhm.
he approved in all those cases, it seems. Okay. And then what about Fit to Lead and this contract with Crank Industries? How did you as a Boost administrator end up paying out invoices for that?
We started receiving invoice from Fit to Lead, and then I would call up. I believe I had called up Will and said, "Why are we getting these invoices?" And he indicated that that was another program. I don't know if it was part of Boost or whatever, but that was another program that was affiliated to it, and that the invoices could be paid. So then I forwarded those invoices to the Secretary of Finance and asked if he could review them and then give me his authorization to make the payments, which he would.
I see. Okay. So it was Mr. Castro and Secretary Atalik who asked you to make payments for Fit to Lead.
Right. Well, Secretary Atlik would approve the payments.
I see. Now, in multiple communications, it was pretty clear that there were some performance issues with Nonstop, right? And the principals, Mr. Rob Trevilla in particular, was not responding. He was difficult to get a hold of. At one point, you asked if you could directly contract with Greenlight Media, since they were doing most of the work anyway, right?
Mhm.
Do you recall that?
Yes.
What was the response to that?
Well, it was like, if it takes much longer for us to be able to communicate with Mr. Travilla, then yes, go ahead and we can do what we needed to do to get the work done. That may not necessarily include a direct contract with Green Light, but after those messages and emails, what happened at that time was Nonstop was off island for some kind of convention or something. They were gone for a couple of weeks, but shortly after that, they came back and then they started resuming their responsibilities. And so there was no need for us to take it any further.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then just to clarify, why is it seemed like you were asking for permission, asking the Secretary of Finance to approve a Bank of Saipan contract with a contractor, right? Was there anything unusual about that for you?
I'm sorry, which contract did
The
we ask?
Nonstop contract. The Bank of Saipan's contract is with Nonstop.
Right. No, we didn't ask Secretary of Finance to approve that contract. We basically approved the contract on our own.
You were asking for some kind of approval. Was that just approval to make the
For
advance payments? and then
Payments
get
outside of
reimbursed?
the contract.
I see.
Okay.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned that you were involved in drafting the various iterations of the guidelines,
Mhm.
right, for the Boost program. Earlier iterations did state that applications would be reviewed on a first-come, first-served basis.
Right.
How did that change?
Well, there was some discussion.
With who?
Well, there was I think it was the SBDC had some kind of expo, and a question arose: were we going to review these applications on a first come first served basis? And that was initially what was approved. Well, agreed to in the description. And then a lot of the attendees would raise concern that well, what would happen to the last person to submit an application? They wouldn't get any money at all. And then it was decided at that point in time that okay, we would not look at this, or it was decided at a meeting shortly after that we would not look at it on a first come first served basis. That we would review all applications that were submitted.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But ultimately, who made the decision then that applications would not be reviewed on a first come first served basis?
It was with the committee that we were working with, the Secretary of Finance, Secretary of Commerce, and with Mr. Castro.
Okay. And then the guidelines that you provided also indicated that decisions would be based, at least in part, funding decisions on how much money was actually left in the program. You recall
Yes.
that? And who made the decision to begin issuing awards before the deadline?
It was a review panel.
The review panel as well. You had no concerns about that?
Well, I thought that applications were building up, and it would be an enormous task to start reviewing all the applications in bulk. I thought that that maybe if we started taking little chunks at a time, we would be able to get notices out faster to applicants who had submitted requests.
Mm-hmm. And who made the decision then to extend the deadline 3 times?
We would get those notifications from Mr. Castro.
Okay. And why was the deadline extended 3 times?
Nothing definitive other than the fact that there are so many applications being submitted, and that the extension was to allow more people to submit applications.
Even though you already knew as the bank administrator that you had received more than enough applications to exhaust the amount available in the program, right?
Yeah, and my understanding was that not everybody, there was no obligation to pay everybody who had submitted an application an award.
Mhm.
It was more or less that you would or would not, or you could get an amount less.
Mhm.
And my understanding is that, because of the number of applications received, that there would be some applicants that would not get any money.
Mhm. Okay. And in earlier iterations of the guidelines, there are notes that appear to have come from you where you ask if the different types of grants for nonprofits, for small businesses, for new industries, for banks, these buckets, right? Whether those types of grants should be disclosed to the public. How was that question answered?
That we would hold those buckets and the allocations uh, for each of those buckets internally, kind of as a guideline for the panel to decide, how much more money do they have to expend on these particular industries within their life cycle. And the reason behind that was because if we let people know what was the maximum amount that they could apply for, they would automatically apply for the maximum amount. What was the hope was that if they didn't know what the maximum amount was, then they would apply for only the amount that they needed.
Mhm. Right. And similarly, in earlier iterations, there are notes in which you ask if the amounts available for each bucket and the caps on the awards should be disclosed to the public.
Hmm.
And how was that question answered?
That way,
That
just that
way.
way, yeah.
That it was better to keep that information
Internally,
internally.
yeah.
Now, did it make sense to you as the administrator of this program and as the president and CEO of a bank to not disclose to potential applicants how much they could actually apply for?
Yes, it did, primarily because it didn't set a limit how much they could ask for. If we set a limit that you could only ask for this much, then that's as much as they would ask for.
Mhm.
But if they didn't know that there was a limit, and then they could ask for millions of dollars if
But
they wanted
as
to.
you stated, no matter what they asked for, there was no obligation from the
Exactly.
review panel to give an award in any amount.
Yes.
So they could have, the review panel could have stated the max, and everybody could have asked for the max, but there was no obligation to give everybody the max, nor
Right.
was there enough funding for that anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's absolutely true.
Right.
So on the other side of the coin, if there was no limit, they could ask for as much as they wanted. But our assumption was that if we were hoping that they would only ask for what they needed.
Mhm. Now you've stated that there's only about 1.5 to 2 million left that has been, and that the rest, the bulk of the available funding has already been distributed to just over 200 applicants, right? And there are still, as you've said, thousands of applicants left, including workforce development applicants who have yet to be awarded, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree that it is simply not possible to award all of the thousands of applicants who have collectively requested over $300 million?
Yes, I would.
Do you think that it's about time that Mr. Castro and anyone else involved in the Boost program stop saying that nobody has been denied?
I wouldn't want to make that judgment simply because I'm not part of the review panel, and I don't want to indicate whether or not I would say that some application is denied or another application is approved.
As the administrator of the program, though, is it fair to continually say that when you know that there really isn't that much funding left?
I know that at some point in time, when the funds run dry, then I would get a notification from them saying, okay, so these applications are declined. Let's provide notification or denied. Let's provide notification to these individuals that their application, was denied.
Mhm. And that leads me to my next question. So, will notices of denial be going out
Yeah,
anytime
we're
soon?
we're trying to figure out in what mechanism that you would be, feasible economically and effective to do that. We look at doing bulk emails, notices. We probably might put a notice on the website,
Mhm.
something similar and along those lines.
Okay. And is that the plan then for terminating the program?
Yes.
to post it on a website and make an announcement?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that it's Bank of Saipan that issues the checks, but who makes the decision about how the checks would actually be distributed?
How the what?
The checks would actually be distributed. So, for example, on occasion, according to the communications, we see Mr. Castro instructing the bank to hold or release checks to certain individuals. On occasion, it appears that it's the governor himself that is supposed to distribute checks. Who is deciding when and how checks would go out?
Oh, you mean actually distributed?
Mhm.
For the most part, we actually distribute the checks. If for some reason there's an event that's planned and happening where, the governor wants to be the one to present the checks, then we would get notification that have these checks available for this particular event for the governor to do the distributions. And so we would do that.
Okay. And in those cases, then you would give the checks to whom?
Depends on the situation and how quickly we can get the checks and delivered, and where the event is taking place. If we could deliver to the governor ourselves, then we would. Otherwise, we would have to give it to somebody who would then give them to the governor.
Somebody authorized
Yes.
to receive checks that were not made out to them, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And in
yes.
that case, it would be who? Mr. Castro? Who would pick up the checks?
Sometimes it would be Selena Sapp, who would be accompanying Mr. Castro and others to an event off island.
Okay. What about the Secretary of Finance? Did he ever pick up checks?
Not that I know of.
Okay. You developed a rubric
Mhm.
in the guidelines that you provided that were supposed to guide funding recommendations by the review panel. Are you aware of whether that rubric was ever actually used?
I'm not aware. Again, I'm not part of the review panels.
Mhm.
We're not even in the room, so I don't know if they use it or not.
Are you aware of any documentation of any meetings of the review panel?
No, I am not aware.
Did you ever see any score sheets or evaluation sheets or any record of evaluation by the members of the review panel?
When we get the applications reviewed by the panel, when they return them, the score sheets are not attached to them.
Does it make any sense to you, as the administrator of this program, that the review panel would not use a standard rubric or score sheet?
I don't know what goes on in their meetings. I don't know if they discuss the the rubric at all, if they make mental notes or among themselves and scoring them on, as they're reviewing. I don't know how they're doing it. My assumption is that there is a process, a procedure that they follow that in making these decisions that, is fair and equitable.
But you don't know what that process is,
No, I don't.
and there's no record of that process.
No, there isn't.
Is there an appeals process?
Nothing in writing, but we have received, communications, directly from applicants, and along the lines of we've received some funds, not as much as we asked for. Is there a possibility that we can get more money? I get those emails and I forward them on to Mr. Castro.
You give those to Mr. Castro?
Yes.
Okay. But is there an appeals process that is in writing somewhere? If somebody wants
No,
to
there is no
contest a
appeal process.
denial?
Yeah, not in writing.
Mr. Castro said that you would know what that appeals process would be. So there is none.
No, there's none in writing.
So how do people actually contest their awards or their denials? They would just write to you and you would forward it to Mr. Castro?
Yes.
And then where does it go from there?
I'm assuming Mr. Castro would present it to the review panel for their consideration.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Castro stated that there was no written conflict of interest policy. Is that correct?
There is none.
Why was there no conflict of interest policy?
Again, that would come into play with the review panel. And again, what happens in the review panel, was not part of the design work that we did.
Mm-hmm. But you developed the guidelines, right? You developed a rubric, which they didn't use.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there should have been a conflict of interest policy?
Yeah, I think something like that would have been played out better.
Mhm. Like if you knew that there were multiple applications submitted by family members, close associates,
Mhm.
business partners of members of the review panel, would you have recommended that there should be a conflict of interest policy?
I would assume that the close relationships that exist here on the island, that the review panel would know who they're related to if they knew who the applicants were,
Mhm.
aside from a business name, that they would take it upon themselves to recuse themselves if they perceive that there was a conflict of interest.
And would you say that there should be a record of their recusals?
I believe so.
Why, as the administrator, did you not insist that there be something in the guidelines that you were drafting to protect against conflicts of interest and to ensure the integrity of this program that you were administrating?
Um, Again, for those particular things inside the review panel, we had no discussions or conversations with how the review panel exercised that authority. Aside from what we had indicated that there was going to go to the review panel, it was up to the review panel to determine whether or not they were going to keep minutes that would indicate, how applications were reviewed, um, whether or not there were a conflict of interest. That was entirely up to the review panel.
Now, you mentioned that you were very concerned about potential liability. What kind of liability were you concerned about with respect to this program?
Liability to the bank with respect to releasing funds to unauthorized individuals.
Mhm. And what steps did you take to protect the bank against liability?
We require them to provide, for corporations, we require them to provide to us a board resolution that basically indicated that the board had approved the application for a boost grant,
Mhm.
and then indicating in the resolution who the authorized individual was to receive the funds.
Okay. Now, you
And
stated at one point in your testimony today, Bank of Saipan was not driving this, right?
yes,
You didn't have the authority to dictate how the program would be run. You said that Bank of Saipan wasn't responsible for the final approval of the guidelines or the rubric or ensuring proper documentation for the reviews or the order in which applications were being reviewed. You had nothing to do with the website. You didn't even decide whether applications needed to be complete by the deadline, right? In order to be considered. You didn't decide who got awards. You didn't decide how much they got. So if Bank of Saipan, as the administrator, was not driving this, who was?
a lot of those, questions and communication came to us from Mr. Castro.
Okay. And when Mr. Castro said that it was the Bank of Saipan as the administrator who is responsible for the operations of the program, is that an accurate statement? Would you agree with that?
I think there are certain degrees in which we were responsible, but a lot of the work that we did, came from other individuals, involved in the program, and those were the instructions that we would follow. What was key to us in all of these things was whether or not they were signed off by the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance, we were responsible too with respect to administering these funds. So if we got indication from them that this was an approved thing, then we would follow that instruction.
Okay. And did Mr. Castro ever instruct you to do anything that was inconsistent with your normal processes in administering this program?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Was it ever unusual to be instructed to hold a check or release a check to a certain individual? Was that unusual at all? Or to adjust an amount after it had already been approved?
With respect to holding checks, sometimes we would get notification that hold on to a check because we just discovered that something is missing from the application, or sometimes we would discover that something was missing from the application, and then we would indicate to him that we are holding the check because of this particular problem. So sometimes that would happen.
Mhm.
What was the other question?
If a check was being held or released, or if you were instructed to, well, I mean, that's just one
Yeah,
example.
so
Or
sometimes,
somebody was going to pick up a check for somebody.
again, for
Yeah.
special events and things like that, that was not
Mhm.
unusual.
Okay. And did Secretary Atelig ever instruct you to do anything that was inconsistent with your normal processes?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. I yield at this time.
Thank you, Rep. Sablan. Just one clarified questions, and then we'll close out with Rep. Probes. Um, so I just want to make this clear because this will be part of the request that we'll submit to council. In regards to the expenditure for administering this program, I understand that there were invoices that were billed separately or directly to the Department of Finance. How much of the expenses in regards to the administration of this program was paid for by Bank of Saipan, and how much was paid for by directly from finance?
The contracts that we had were paid directly by the Bank of Saipan. The contracts for the invoices for companies that we did not have contracts were paid for under instruction by the Department of Finance.
So everything that came out from Nonstop or like Fit to Lead and all of that, those came out of your 2%, Bank of Saipan's 2%.
No, for Nonstop, their contract with us came from us. Except for billings that were not included within their scope of work, then we would get the Department of Finance to approve those invoices. Invoices from Fit to Lead and Royal Soil, we don't have a contract with any of those, so I would submit those invoices to the Department of Finance and get their approval to pay.
Okay. So like trips to Rhoda or trips to Tinian, is that something that came out of Bank of Saipan or something you billed directly to?
Something we bill directly to the finance.
Okay. So would you happen to have the breakdown of what
Yes,
the
I
total
think
administration of the Boost program, as well as what was paid for out of Bank of Saipan and what was paid for directly by?
yeah, we can get you the expense report.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I recognize Rep. Probes.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Arroyo, again, I want to thank you for your time and also for the things that we requested earlier. If we could get that as soon as possible, we would really appreciate that. Again, it'd make our work so much easier and be able to clarify a lot of things. I just wanted to get back to with regard to the Fit to Lead program. So is the Fit to Lead program, how is it being funded?
We would receive invoices. I would submit those invoices to the Secretary of Finance, ask for his authorization to pay and to pull the money from the boost funds.
From the Boost funds. So it's being paid for by Boost funds.
Yes.
And the reason why I asked that is because it's very interesting because the Fit to Lead program really had nothing to do with Boost. It's completely separate. Someone can try to correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole Fit to Lead program was about Ralph Torres, right? Being fit to lead and having this exercise program and having people becoming healthier. And there were ads that were in the papers about 19 reasons to join. I'm sorry, there was just a bunch of ads and other things, but it wasn't Boost related. So that's why I was really shocked to see in the messages and that this somehow was being included. It wasn't as if Fit to Lead was advertising for Boost. It was Fit to Lead on a totally separate program. So I'm just very concerned about the funding source, them taking Boost, because that is not uh, that's not proper. You know, when you have funds set up for a particular reason, okay, so Nonstop Corporation was doing advertising, right, for Boost, right? But Fit to Lead was an exercise about exercising and being fit to lead. It's a completely separate. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and so of course we're very concerned about this because it just does not make sense. But nonetheless, it was included in sort of like the advertising expenses. Is that correct? If it's being paid for by Boost expense, right? Is this coming out of that marketing expense that was being paid, or
No, it's not coming out of the marketing expense. It was just an expense that I got authorization to pay. So that,
using Boost funds though?
using Boost funds.
Okay, so it wasn't specified that it was marketing, but it was
Right.
still nonetheless being paid for by Boost. So
Mhm.
so if Fit to Lead got paid $50,000, was that the amount roughly 100,000?
It would be in this expense report
Okay,
that I
that
sent
we'll
you.
get. Okay,
Okay.
and we'll look at it. But again, that is money that went to pay for Fit to Lead. That was an exercise for something totally separate that could have gone to one of these businesses that applied. You understand that's something that would be very frustrating if I were a business owner and we found out today that there's only $1.5 million left in the program, for example, and there's thousands of companies, but we are using Boost funds to pay for an activity that has nothing, absolutely whatsoever, to do with the actual Boost program. You see that, and that's, I think, just something that I'm really looking forward to the Secretary of Finance and somebody else trying to explain how does Fit to Lead fit in to Boost. That's like using federal funds for something that was not authorized. It just doesn't, like buying alcohol, for
Mhm.
example. Oh wait, that already happened under Boost. So there are these red flags that are going off, and that Fit to Lead should have been paid for by another um, program, whether it's federal or local. I'm not sure what the actual contract that was made originally for Fit to Lead, but it was. I know it wasn't part of Boost. It wasn't like Frank Camacho saying, I'm Fit to Lead and we're doing Boost, right? We're here to boost you up, right? It wasn't boost you up. It was Fit to Lead with Ralph Torres in the forefront, exercising and working out and other things and trying to get people in better shape. A great program, fantastic. We support it, Fit to Lead. But again, how does this deal with Boost? That's something that I would really like a further clarification on. But thank you again. I look forward to the documents that we will be getting soon. I I I yield at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize the culture.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned earlier you started receiving invoices for Fit to Lead. Who did you receive those invoices from?
Frank Camacho.
And then you asked clarification from Mr. William Castro about these because you didn't understand it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then he informed you, and we've seen through the communication that you provided, that invoice them separately with a footnote to Boost. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And so these funds that were being paid to Fit to Lead was being paid for from the Boost seed money. Is that correct?
Yes, they were.
So it would have meant less money for the applicants. They were taking money away from actual applications, businesses and nonprofits who are asking for help, and who instructed you to use the boost seed money to pay for all these extracurricular activities that had nothing to do with boost?
Secretary of Finance.
The Secretary of
I'm
Finance.
going to authorize the payments.
Okay. Thank you. We've learned a lot from you today. We've learned that Mr. William Castro actually played a bigger role than what he led us to believe. And we thank you for your frankness today. And I will yield at this time.
Thank you. I know we're supposed to close, but the vice chair just had a clarifying question so that we can wrap it up,
Yes,
wrap
sorry.
this up in the report.
Sorry about that. Just real quick to clarify. So earlier you had stated that the Secretary of Finance had asked you to pay some of the invoices, right? That's not related to Boost, correct?
Not ask me to pay, but authorize the payment.
Authorize the payment as in wire payments or check payments? Or like,
Payments would normally be in the form of a check.
okay, and then the payments would come out of whose account? The government account or the Boost account?
The boost funds.
And then so you would just invoice them back to reimburse you for those payments, correct?
Well, no, the authorization would be go ahead and make the payment and draw the funds or offset the funds, the payment against the boost funds.
Right, but those invoices that you were paying, so you were saying that the contracts that Bank of Saipan has, you would pay for it, right?
Mhm.
But then the contracts that are not with Bank of Saipan, the Secretary of Finance would ask you to just pay for it and then invoice them back.
Yes.
And are there any associated fees attached to those invoices when you invoice them back? Like, do you charge them any processing fee? Or,
Yes, we would charge a
and
fee.
what are those fees?
It would just be a kind of an administration
Adminis-
fee. Yeah.
administrative fees, like how much or what percent?
Sometimes somewhere around 30%.
30%.
Mhm.
So if you were to pay a $20,000 invoice, you would charge 30% as part of your processing fee.
Yes, yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. In closing, I just want to ask, would you happen to know when was the last round of disbursement was?
Friday? Yeah, I think the last check that went out was Friday, I believe.
Just this past Friday?
Yes.
Do you have a log of when, well, to your understanding, is the office that you provide the panel the place where they would make these decisions? Would you happen to know if they have these meetings elsewhere?
I don't know.
Do you have a log as to when they would come in and out, or would know when they would come and to review these files?
No, we don't.
But they would need your permission or your key to access this room, correct?
Right. So, I mean, if anything, it would be an email or something. Can we use?
Your room,
Yeah,
the room.
yeah. For
Do you know when when was the last time they met as a panel?
last week, I think it was sometime. I can't remember what day.
Have they made any requests for future meetings?
No, they have not.
Do you know if the distribution from last Friday was a decision they've made from the last week's meeting, or was this done?
I don't believe
Oh,
it came
why
from
not?
last week's meeting. We had not received any notification of any approved applications from their last meeting.
Do you know what? Or do you remember when the last time the bank received the approval list of these funds to be distributed?
I'd have to refer to Karen in a second. Last week, Tuesday. What day is that?
December 13th.
December 13th, Tuesday, December 13th.
So the approved list on the 13th would have been the distribution of those funds on Friday. Or will you have another
yeah, shortly
distribution?
after that. Yeah, shortly after that, depending on how quickly it would take for us to cut checks.
Okay. No, but the December 13th list or the Friday distribution was from the December 13th list.
No. The Friday distribution was from the, from the December 12th, there's a December 12th. list.
We'll allow her to speak. That's it.
So then there's another approved list after this December
December 12th
12th.
or December 13th.
So you're expected to do one more round of disbursement from the December 13th list. Do you know when you plan to distribute those funds?
When we get funding.
So
There's
it's-
not enough money.
so the 1.5 to 2 won't cover the
yeah, yeah.
most recent
And I
list.
have to, like I said, the 1.5 is just a mathematical
right.
number based on what was approved, what I know of to be dispersed at this point in time. But there are probably some funds that have not yet been dispersed, or otherwise committed. So when I produce this report, you'll have the actual number of the remaining money available.
Understood. So understanding that there's not enough funds for the December 13th list, have you made the request to finance already for the additional funds?
We received a form for the request of the additional funds. So we're holding on to that. We have not received another award as a sub-awardee for that $3 million yet.
And so that the 3 million is how much you would need to pay that December 13th list?
I'm not sure what the total amount of that.
1.2 is what's needed to pay for the December 13th list. All right. All right. Thank you so much. I know these are some questions that were members of the public were concerned about since closing our last meeting. And so with that, we will break for today. Thank you, members, and thank you to Mr. Arroyo and to Ms. Karen and your council. We will continue on tomorrow at 10 a.m. But then we'll cut it. We may end by lunchtime and then continue the following day due to
So
a meeting
tomorrow
in
will
the
be a
afternoon.
shorter day for you. We will start at 10, around 10, and then possibly end at between 12 and 12:30. And then we'll
Yes.
continue if we have to, and if we need to, we will continue into Wednesday.
Thursday.
Tomorrow's Tuesday.
Oh,
What's,
yes. Yeah. So sorry. Tuesday will be there's nothing all day, right? No, sorry. Tuesday is an all day thing. I'm sorry. Wednesday would be the half day if we need to go that further. Yeah. All right. Thank you again, Mr. Arroyo. Have a good rest of your evening. We'll have our councils prepare the requests of the additional information and we'll hand it over to your council. And so we will now recess until 10 a.m. tomorrow, the 20th.